All right, I believe we can get started. My name's Keith Reed. I'm the editor of Fuel Oil News Magazine. We're here for our session today, Growing Your Business with Bioheat. We'll have two presenters. Pardon me. The first presenter will be Rocco J. Lacertosa. Rocco is the CEO-elect at the New York Oil Heating Association. He's going to discuss current trends impacting the heating oil market and what these trends mean to heating oil retailers. He's going to have a focus on some of the initiatives in New York and the Northeast. In addition, Rocco is going to provide an overview of legislative activities in the Northeast and how these can and will impact the market. You know, it's interesting, about a month ago, I did an editor's note for our magazine on legislation and kind of touched on the fact in there that unlike a lot of industries and organizations, the organizations in our industry are not necessarily pushing legislative activities or regulation, but, you know, they're generally trying to protect ourselves from other people's pushes. And what's interesting is there are a few areas where, you know, that's really not the case. And one of them has been promoting a bioheat blended fuel, fuel using low sulfur content, primarily through the Northeast. And, you know, there's a few reasons for that and a few reasons why, you know, something that's counterintuitive for an industry makes perfect sense. Of course, the first area is that demographically the Northeast tends to be environmentally conscious compared to, say, a number of other areas in the United States. And the other part of it, of course, is that natural gas has spent decades beating up the industry over, you know, various environmental criticisms. So we're finally in a position to offer the market a fuel that's not only as clean as natural gas, but certainly cleaner than natural gas. And, you know, it helps us get a seat at the table. I suppose the one concern is that for a lot of the most environmentally focused people out there, there's you know, almost a zero emission focus, whether that's practical or not. But without having that really solid message to bring to the table, you know, I think we find ourselves at a distinct disadvantage. So Rocco is going to talk a little bit, you know, really about some of these initiatives in New York and how their industries really got out in front and, you know, bringing things ahead in the marketplace. So with that, you know, our next speaker is going to be John Sherrington. John is REG's Executive Director, Sales and Marketing. And he's going to discuss how adding bioheat blended fuel to the product mix can help enhance margins, grow your heating oil business. Learn the economics, mandates, and incentives available to retailers, as well as the availability, logistics, and ease of integration of the product. REG is a leading North American advanced biofuels producer and developer of renewable chemicals. With 10 biodiesel refineries across the country, research and development capabilities, and a diverse and growing intellectual property portfolio, REG is committed to being a long-term leader in bio-based fuels and chemical. And, you know, John's part of the presentation gets back to the other green we're all interested in, and that's return on investments, profits, margin, availability of supply, you know, those good things. And, you know, it really is kind of an exciting and invigorated period in the industry for bioheat. You know, we've recently had NORA reauthorized, and NORA has a strong focus on bioheat, both looking at the fuel itself, and, you know, we've recently had the ASTM B20 standard out there, but also looking at, you know, the next generation of heating appliances. In fact, they're looking to bypass, you know, B20 enabled appliances up to appliances that are functional at B100. So they're playing long ball with that. Quick note on questions. Feel free to submit questions using the dashboard on the right side. Submit them at any time. We're not going to be using the audio feature for questions. And our panelists will answer the questions at the end of the webinar. We will try, but may not succeed in answering all questions in the time allotted, but you'll have contact information available for all of our speakers to follow up on if need be. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Rocco. Rocco?
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for having me on this. I appreciate it, and hope to do the subject well. You can go on to the next slide here. This is from an article that I found just doing some research on something else that talked about the rise and imminent fall of biodiesel. It appeared back in June of 2012 in Forbes magazine. And you could see the quote there, but I think, at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that this industry is still alive and well today. So next slide. All right. Here in New York City, we've enacted a biodiesel mandate, and it was 2% blended into ultra-low sulfur heating oil. New Yorkers here are proud to be B2 with this mandate. We're getting the word out, and New York dealers get on board here. And the message has been that New York City consumers are now using the cleanest heating oil in America. It's domestically produced from renewable sources like soy and food byproducts. It's clean burning, which reduces sulfur and particulate emissions, which is most important. All right. Back one, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. We are the largest municipal user of biodiesel in the nation, and to quote Paul Mazzaro, founder of Advanced Fuel Solutions and Bioheat advocate, New York City's B2 mandate exemplifies their leadership both locally and globally as a community in proactively improving our environment and economy through their commitment to Bioheat and biodiesel in general. Just some points of information that while I was putting this together, I found that several South American countries have had biodiesel mandates in place from 2012 to present, and Europe and Asia Pacific are biodiesel friendly as well. And their blends range from B1 up to B20. So we can see that this is definitely a global trend. When we think about emissions, climate change, and all other factors impacting our environment, biodiesel is a good product to be part of that. The market trend has been a move to cleaner fuels, and we've been using the B2 blend here now for 3 years with no performance issues. We've had no issues of any consequence with equipment failures or anything else like that. And Brookhaven National Labs states that blends up to B5 are already accepted by most major manufacturers of home heating equipment and typically will not jeopardize a consumer's warranty. Also, it reduces fuel-related service calls. I've spoken to a number of people, on the service side of things, and they're happy, as are their technicians, with the difference in the fuel, the ULSD that's blended with B2. Biofuels also put us on the road to energy independence. New York City uses approximately 900 million gallons of heating oil annually. In 2012, New York City mandated at least 2% of biodiesel be blended into all heating oil, creating a demand for about 18 to 20 million gallons here every year. The ASTM spec now is included up to 5%. Discretionary blenders, those people who want to blend more, add more gallons to this mix. The other part of this is tax credits that New York City residents and businesses can take advantage of with the Bioheat tax credit that now offers a 1 cent per percent of every gallon of biodiesel blended into the heating oil. And the ASTM spec now for heating oil is allowing blends up to 20% biodiesel, and there's pending New York City legislation to increase biodiesel blends in heating oil to 5%, and demand can potentially double to about 70 million gallons a year as a result of this. So if you can go to the next slide then, Keith. We, on the legislative side, we have our city council member here, Constantinidis. He introduces a bill, Intro 54, that by January of 2020, every diesel fuel-powered city ferry would be powered by an ultra-low sulfur diesel blend with at least 20% biodiesel by volume. Incorporating biodiesel fuel into the city's ferry fleet would lessen New York City's dependence on fossil fuels reduce greenhouse gas emissions, leading to cleaner air for all of us. The bill was introduced in February 26th of 2014, was heard by the Committee on Environmental Protection in January of 2015, and awaits a vote in the committee. I will be giving testimony when they introduce at the hearings to get this bill to become law. If it goes through, we'll be looking at it being enacted sometimes in 2016. I wanted to put in some of the advantages of biodiesel fuel blends for home heating oil. And as we can see, it's virtually sulfur-free, which means it will burn cleaner, reduces particulate matter, requires no modification to current equipment in your customers' homes. Bioheat helps lower toxic emissions into the atmosphere, good for the environment, produced domestically, and creates jobs. And talking about the Northeast here, Keith, if you just roll that slide up a little bit more, I can't see the bottom of it. But anyway, in Connecticut, as you can see, there are several states here with looking to have bioheat requirements, but it all depends on what happens in the neighboring states, as you can see there. Obviously, New York City enacted it in 2012. And it applies to all grades of fuel, number 2, 4, and 6. Rhode Island, January 1st, 2014, with a blend of 2%, and you can see the subsequent years there. One note, though, is that the above requirements will only go into effect if the neighboring states establish similar requirements, and that applies to Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont. The original B2 bill, called Local Law Number 43, was passed in July of 2010, became effective October of 2012. City Council Member Constantinidis has proposed a move to B5, and the hearing I referred to earlier is scheduled for this September to discuss this issue. The city wanted to go to higher blends. They wanted to go faster, up to a B20. We discussed the issues with them, and they will stay with the B5, and the ramp up will take later years. Anything beyond B5 right now would potentially be considered a non-conforming fuel. We still have an issue of legacy pumps that manufacturers might not warranty, so that's why we don't want to go past the B5 blend. The city also has an initiative called the 80 by 50 Climate Change Pledge. And again, our council member Constantinidis is very active on this, proposing Intro 378, which would mandate a 30% reduction in citywide greenhouse gases by 2030 relative to 2005 emission levels, and an 80% reduction by the year 2050. This bill mandates the emissions reduction goals originally proposed by our former Mayor Bloomberg in his Plan NYC, which laid out the steps to get us to the 80 by 50. To do this, the city intends to invest in city-owned buildings, to energy upgrades and investments in nearly 3,000 city-owned buildings to accomplish this, and also provide privately owned building owners with financial incentives to do the same. And what it means is that we're heading for a cleaner, greener New York City, and all of these measures, including the use of biodiesel, will help get us there. Further on the Northeast, we have Maine, which approved HB 416, eliminates the use of 50 ppm requirement on July 1st, 2016, and moves to 15 parts per million. January 1st to July 2018 to conform to other New England states. The New Hampshire legislature has approved SB 208, and the governor signed it on May 7th of 2015, establishing a committee to study the contents of liquid fuels, and the findings must be submitted by November 1st of 2016. And as you can see, New York State here, we recently was debated by the State Assembly, the Bioheat tax credit was renewed, and it's effective through 12/31/16. That offers a 1 cent per percent of biodiesel used in heating oil up to a maximum of 20 cents. Pending legislation, a Bioheat bill was first cleared the legislature in 2013, but was vetoed January of 2014, citing financial impact on the state budget. And I think that issue was, the fact that the tax credits would, take money out of the state's budget if they had to refund that money to consumers. The other Bioheat bill would have established a 2% blending requirement statewide on July 1st, 2017, and this would require the DEC and NYSERDA to produce a study of biodiesel cost and supply by December 1st, 2016. The bill was approved, but in the Assembly was stalled in the Senate. And finally, the economics. The increased value to gross domestic product here would be $32.5 million to the New York State from the increased biodiesel production, and $16.3 million from proposed soybean crush plant, and total impact of $48.8 million for the state economy. Higher household incomes for New Yorkers, the economic activity generated by the increased biodiesel production and soybean processing will generate about $24 million additional income for New York households, and as much as $1.5 million in personal tax revenue. And finally, as a consequence of increased economic activities, taxes on production and corporate income would generate $3.7 million annually. So,
well, thank you, Rocco. I appreciate that.
thank you.
We're going to, again, anybody that has questions for Rocco, feel free to enter them. We're going to get around to them at the end of the total presentation, but by all means, you don't have to wait till then. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to John. John?
Thanks, Keith. Can you hear me okay?
It seems to be pretty, I can hear him fairly clearly, yes.
Okay, great. I'll get started here. So thanks for everybody for taking the time to participate in the webinar today. We certainly appreciate it. So Keith, let's go ahead and scroll through the slides here. Yeah, next one. So I just wanted to start with a kind of a big picture macroeconomic view of how heating oil fits into the overall distillate pool. So REG is a biodiesel producer, but I think this slide illustrates, of the approximately, 57 to 60 billion gallon a year distillate consumption in the U.S. Heating oil, even though it's been declining over the last several years, still, maintains a very significant component of the overall distillate consumption, and obviously that's shaded pretty heavily in the Northeast. But we still have nearly 5 billion gallons annually in that commercial and industrial space, and over 3 billion gallons annually in residential. So heating oil continues to be very, very important across the country in terms of, particularly heating people's homes and apartments and residences in the Northeast part of the U.S. Go ahead, Keith. So this next slide is really an attempt to demonstrate that biodiesel and bioheat is no longer a niche fuel. It is readily available across the country, particularly in the Northeast and the heating oil market. And the demand driver for that has been a combination of, the city, New York City incentives and mandate that we've seen, as well as some of the other Northeastern legislative activity. But the other driver has really been the renewable fuel standard signed by, then President Bush all the way back in 2007. And it set up 4 different categories of renewable fuels, of which biomass-based diesel as one. And here a couple of months ago, we finally got the Environmental Protection Agency's recommended requirements or mandate for the obligated parties for the biodiesel component of the RFS2. And as an industry, we were pleased with the fact that, we're going to see a 1.7 billion gallon minimum size market in 2015, 1.8 billion gallons in 2016, growing to 1.9 billion gallons in 2017. And once again, what that means for the participants on this call is that as recently as 2010, there was only 300 million gallons of biodiesel integrated into the total distillate pool across the entire United States. So we're still at less than 5% market penetration, but once again, it's no longer a niche fuel. It is readily available by very viable producers across the country today. Next slide. And Rocco already hit on a big chunk of this. So some of the demand drivers for biodiesel across the country, in addition to RFS2, are the various state incentives. So there are some nice incentives for biodiesel as a #2 LSD transportation fuel in places like Texas and California and Iowa and Illinois, and the folks on this call aren't interested in that. But the big drivers up in the Northeast, once again, are that New York City mandate, are that New York State tax incentive, and I think we've continued to see growing momentum throughout the Northeast for additional legislative activity to be passed, particularly as we've gone to the 15 ppm standard in New York. That will be across the region here over the next 2 to 3 years. We're going to continue to see biodiesel and bioheat much more readily available. Go ahead, Keith. Next slide, Keith. Yeah, so Rocco talked about some of these, just the benefits of biodiesel, and I've got a slide on the benefits of bioheat later on, but it is a drop-in replacement for both heating oil and #2 ULSD. I think one of the exciting things about biodiesel is that we're using multiple feedstocks to actually convert into biodiesel at this point in time. So historically, pre-2010, most of the biodiesel in the country was made from soybean oil. We saw a significant run-up in agricultural commodities over the last few years, and companies like REG and others started looking to less expensive feedstocks, things such as animal fat, used cooking oil from fast food restaurants, and inedible corn oil, which is a byproduct of the ethanol production process. And that's really allowed REG and others to have cost-competitive biodiesel and bioheat in the marketplace across the country. We continue to be excited about the carbon intensity, the GHG emission reduction profile of bioheat at B10 blends and higher. It also does provide tremendous lubricity to heating oil, and that's certainly been important to our customers as well. And then finally, I think we tend to lose sight of this, particularly with $43 crude out there right now. But the utilization of renewable fuels does continue to reduce our dependence upon foreign oil. Next slide, please, Keith. So this is just a snapshot of some of the different retail locations across the country. You can buy straight biodiesel, and once again, this is just showing people that biodiesel and bioheat are here and now and readily available virtually everywhere. And then finally, the next slide here. And then this is just, I took this from Bioheat Online, once again, Paul Nazzaro's website, showing that we're starting to get very good penetration of people marketing bioheat throughout the Northeast region. Keep going, Keith. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and as Keith said, obviously biodiesel and bioheat are environmentally green, and we're certainly excited about that, and that's been one of the drivers for adoption by New York City. But what a lot of the folks are really interested in are the blending economics and the opportunities to integrate biodiesel and bioheat into their heating oil operations and the opportunities to make money on that. So let's talk a bit about that in the next slide. So there are basically 4 different fundamentals in terms of taking advantage of biodiesel blending economics. So Rocco really talked to the New York tax incentive as being one of those opportunities, and obviously there's the New York City mandate, opportunities to pass some of the cost savings along from utilization of biodiesel across New York State to your commercial customers. There also, as folks continue to be interested in making infrastructure improvements on their facilities to actually bring Bioheat into the marketplace. There's still a number of states throughout the Northeast that have state grants available to help with those type of investments. But really the two economic considerations folks really need to be aware of and understand the value of when it comes to integrating biodiesel in the Bioheat into your heating oil are RINs as well as the federal blenders tax credit. So RIN stands for Renewable Identification Number. It's the compliance mechanism utilized by the EPA. They get it attached with each biodiesel wet gallon to ensure that the obligated parties are consuming their appropriate number of biodiesel gallons on an annual basis. But what's really important to the folks in this call is that they have significant financial value. So RINs traded today in that 68 to 70 cent per RIN range. You get 1.5 RINs with each gallon of biodiesel, which basically is a dollar per gallon of biodiesel that you get from the RIN value when you buy a biodiesel gallon. So you need to really understand the value of RINs, the opportunity to sell and trade RINs in the market, or if you're buying RINless, and we offer biodiesel with and without RINs, make sure that you're getting that subtracted from the purchase price of your biodiesel from your supplier. And then the other component is the federal blenders tax credit. So the biodiesel blenders tax credit started back in 2005. It was intended to be a catalyst to encourage the build out of production capacity of biodiesel across the country, and it'll also allow it to be cost effective versus petroleum-based heating oil and number 2 ULSD. So we're actually in a period of time now where as of December 31st, 2014, the blenders tax credit expired. We as a company are increasingly confident that is going to come back into place, and when the biodiesel tax credit is in place, we tend to see better blending economics throughout the value chain, better discretionary blending economics for our heating oil customers. So please be aware of that, track that, and once again, that's a good profit opportunity when we have good RINs values and the biodiesel tax credit is in place. That's when we tend to see the best blending economics for our customers, and we're anticipating that heading into the 15-16 heating oil season, and it actually looks like that biodiesel tax credit could be extended throughout 2016 as well. Next slide, Keith. So also wanted to talk a bit about operationally some of the advice that we give our customers as they begin integrating biodiesel into their heating oil operations. Go ahead, Keith. Yeah, next slide, Keith. Yeah. So Rocco did a good job of covering these. We've talked about Bioheat being readily available, the fact that the reduced emissions, it is virtually sulfur-free. It does have excellent BTU content and high lubricity. And then I think the next couple of slides here cover blending. Go ahead. Yeah, so one of just the general rules of thumb that we suggest to folks in terms of doing their blending is that warmer is better. So one of the things is that both with the heating oil that you're moving the biodiesel into, as well as the biodiesel itself, ideally both of those fuels should be at least 10 degrees Fahrenheit above the respective cloud points. And 70 degrees Fahrenheit or above is ideal. Also, the more agitation that is provided upon blending, the better. So inline injection blending is available at some terminals and some of the RHE terminals in the New York area and throughout the Northeast. Inline blending does provide a very thorough mixing and consistent product. In particular, if you're working with really cold diesel, this is probably your best option. Go ahead, Keith. But one of the things we've had tremendous success with, both in the Northeast and throughout the rest of the country, is actually more traditional and conventional splash blending. So once again, it's much more effective to splash blend with warm fuel rather than cold fuel, both warm biodiesel and warm diesel fuel. So one of the things you need to watch out for is that if the fuel isn't warm enough or there isn't agitation, is some stratification. So we obviously encourage as much agitation as we can. We have seen as a commonplace activity just the driving of the truck down the road after it's been filled typically provides more than adequate agitation for what we're looking for. Once again, the biodiesel should be warm. We have an 85-degree Fahrenheit minimum requirement in terms of the loading of our biodiesel in the Northeast. But something else to keep in mind is actually the load order of your heating oil and your biodiesel if you're doing the mixing yourself. If you're top loading into your truck, load the diesel first, then the biodiesel. And if you're bottom loading, you want to load your biodiesel, then their diesel fuel. Just because of the viscosity difference between the two products, the density difference, this will help ensure thorough mixing and minimum stratification. Next slide, Keith. So we get lots of questions around cold weather additives for Bioheat, and there are a number of additives out there, and there continue to be more and more as the additive companies make investment in this space that have been shown to be effective at minimizing winter operability challenges with both straight heating oil as well as biodiesel blends. So we don't require any particularly additive to be added in, or excuse, we don't recommend any particular additive. We work with all of the additive companies. We just encourage our companies to buy an additive from a reputable supplier, one that has been developed specifically for biodiesel blends. And an additive that is successful for 100% petrodiesel might not be effective for your biodiesel blend, so be sure to have a good dialogue with your additive supplier. And if you choose to use an additive to improve winter operability, make sure that it's an additive that is for use in Bioheat and Bioheat blends. So to date, no additive yet has been developed that consistently lowers the cloud point of biodiesel at anything that we would consider to be economically reasonable treatment rates. So as I think everyone on this call knows, the cloud point of biodiesel does tend to be higher than straight heating oil. So making blend recommendations B2, B5, B10 to B20, you need to take environmental considerations into account as well as what the cloud point of both your biodiesel as well as your heating oil was to begin with. Next slide, Keith. Next slide, Keith. Yeah, so finally, from a quality assurance perspective, one of the things that the industry has really pushed is a BQ 9000 accreditation program. So a BQ 9000 program is basically a quality assurance program either at the producer stage where the biodiesel is made, or there also is a BQ 9000 marketers as well, where the BQ 9000 is actually sold by producers and retailers. And the BQ 9000 process is similar to the ISO 9000, 9001 process in production manufacturing. It just helps ensure that the biodiesel being purchased is of the highest quality, that the right sampling and testing procedures are in place, that companies retain samples of the biodiesel that was produced, and have the right practices in place in terms of trucking, rail, and barge logistics. So we're continuing to see more and more of our customers, both end users as well as municipalities, actually have a requirement that the biodiesel that is used to make Bioheat be sourced from a BQ 9000 producer or marketer. And then finally, just going to wrap up with a couple of quick slides overview of REG. Yeah, go ahead, Keith. So we are the nation's largest producer and marketer of biodiesel, have well over 300 million gallons of annual production capacity. So most of our production capacity is located in the middle of the country, but we've been able to cost effectively rail biodiesel in the Northeast for the last several years. We've sold 10+ million gallons of biodiesel that's been integrated into Bioheat operations over the last 3 to 4 years. Want to continue to grow that business, and part of the reason we're able to do that is because of our multiple feedstock strategy, using things like corn oil as well as used cooking oil that have a low cloud point that can be converted into high-quality biodiesel. Next slide. Yeah, so in addition to those biodiesel refiners that we have that are the green boxes shown on this map, I also have a number of our terminal locations where we're providing both biodiesel as well as straight heating oil across the country. And then in particular, wanted to emphasize the next slide. Go ahead, Keith. So one of the changes in our strategy over the last couple of years is that up through 2013, we only supplied B99 or B100 neat biodiesel. So we saw an opportunity, particularly in the Northeast market, to be a supplier of both straight heating oil and straight number 2 ULSD, as well as blends of Bioheat and blends of biodiesel for transportation fuel. So we're actively marketing B2 to B20 in particular throughout a number of locations in the Northeast. We continue to sell B99 and B100, and actually at a number of locations as well, you can buy straight petroleum products, straight heating oil, or straight number 2 ULSD from REG. Our business that is selling the straight petroleum products as well as the blended fuels is REG Energy Services. So anybody that wants to reach out to take advantage of that opportunity from REG going forward, please feel free to contact me. Go ahead, Keith. Yeah, so I think we'll wrap up with that. Once again, we've had tremendous success, and the industry has had tremendous success in terms of market penetration of biodiesel and Bioheat, and particularly starting in New York City and New York State because of leadership from people like John Maniscalco and Rocco. But we're really starting to see a lot of interest and a lot of demand for Bioheat across the region as we go forward. So Keith, I think I'll wrap up with that and we'll open it up for questions. Thanks, everybody. Keith, you might have us on mute. I'm not hearing you.
Hello, sorry about that. Yes, I did have you on mute. Say, excellent job. Appreciate both of you providing such thorough presentations and a range of information on Bioheat in the Northeast market and Bioheat as a product itself. First question, just kind of a bookkeeping note. Will this presentation be available in print form? Actually, you should have the presentation available, the entire PowerPoint presentation available as a download for one of the handouts that are available. Also, the presentation is being recorded, so and I know since a number of people kind of logged in late, so for those of you that might have missed some of it, you'll be able to take advantage of the whole thing. First question I guess to ask is, you had touched on a little bit there, John, about REG offering both a blended and a neat product. If you're a dealer, what would be the considerations you might go into as to whether you buy a pre-blended product or you take on the blender obligation yourself?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes down to what tank infrastructure capabilities does the customer have. I'll be candid. You're probably going to get a better deal from REG if you're able to take rail car or truckload quantities, full rail car, full truckload quantities of biodiesel. In those instances, you're best positioned to take advantage of RINs values as well as sharing in some of the blender's tax credit value. Many customers only have one or two tanks available to them, or are picking up at the rack and delivering directly to their customers. So in those cases, obviously, buying the straight heating oil product or buying the B2 to B20 blends, that makes the most sense. So it's really customer by customer dependent. We have seen folks from purchasing from us be able to make the most amount of money in terms of their discretionary blending opportunity by purchasing the neat biodiesel over time.
Excellent. For you, Rocco, you had mentioned that some of your initiatives have kind of been stalled at the governor's mansion in New York, and could you describe briefly a little bit of the politics involved? You would think in a state like New York, an environmental initiative might not receive a great deal of blowback, but I'm certainly aware that is the case. So what are some of the politics involved there, and what do you think the opportunities are to get past that?
Well, I think it's strictly a budgetary and economic issue for the state. I think that's been where the resistance is. I think the city has been much more progressive, and I think eventually, at least it's my hope that we're going to get the state to come along.
We had a question to ask me to clarify that ASTM 396, which is our heating oil specification, covers up to 20% by virtue of the recent ASTM amendment, a 6 to 20% standalone. Just an FYI from Paul Nazaro, actually, who was certainly our kind of our go-to guy in the industry, interfacing with the National Biodiesel Board and out in front on a lot of these heating oil issues.
Okay.
Here's a question. It's kind of coming into place in general with biofuels. On the motor fuel side, you've seen it with ethanol. And now that we're kind of approaching some of the same territory on the heating appliance side, does UL have requirements in place for testing equipment to the new B20 ASTM grade? Is there a list of new equipment that carries the UL mark for use with B20?
So this is John. So biodiesel is being actively marketed across the country as a transportation fuel in number 2 LSD up to B20. So just as there's a D396 standard for heating oil, there's a standard for B6 to B20 utilizing biodiesel in transportation fuel. And the dispensers and the retailers and convenience stores across the country are commonly marketing B6 to B20 blends. The other thing that we've seen a tremendous improvement is the original equipment manufacturers, once again in transportation fuel. So this is the Detroit Diesels, the Cummins, the big engine manufacturers across the country. Virtually all of them have approved a B6 to B20 blend, once again for use in transportation fuel. So I can't answer the UL question beyond B20. I just don't get asked that question very often. I'll have our technical folks dig into that. But it's clearly a standard practice, particularly in the warmer summer months like we're in now across the country. People are taking advantage of that B6 to B20 ASTM label. In many cases blending up to 19.8, 19.9%, and that's a common practice.
Yeah, and that's, it comes back to it where we live in such a, the equipment manufacturers, are all seem to be pretty bullish on the product and have expressed a lot of support for it. And, but, we live in a litigious society and everybody's afraid of the next lawyer down the road and what might happen with that. But it's certainly, these blends have been fairly commonly used and used in a number of areas for some time now.
Yeah, so Keith, just once again, just to affirm that, so some of the largest publicly held companies in the country, as well as some of the largest privately held companies in the country, in the C-store, petroleum majors, and in the travel center arenas, they're all currently marketing B6 to B20 in various places across the country. So we'd have no concerns at all whatsoever in terms of improvement on dispensers and pumps up to B20. Beyond that, I just simply don't know the answer to that. I'll do a little digging and find the answer to that.
Yeah, very good. And we'll look into that a little bit more ourselves, I think. Here's a question. What's the shelf life of bio versus number 2 fuel oil?
Yeah, so I've got my technical manager in here, Kelsey Vincent, and she's much better positioned to answer that question than I am. Go ahead, Kelsey.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So that's a good question that we get commonly from the industry about shelf life. Petroleum diesel, as many of you know, which also includes heating oils of the sort, has a long shelf life. You know, there are no antioxidants or other additional additives that are needed to keep the stability of the petroleum products extended. Biodiesel, on the other hand, is made from fats and oils, which, as you can imagine, do break down over time. So biodiesel actually does have an additive that you can put in there. It's called an antioxidant. It helps to slow down or improve the biodiesel quality so that its shelf life is expanded. The ASTM 6751 specification for biodiesel has a requirement that the biodiesel should have a oxidative stability indicator of a minimum of 3 hours. And REG itself has a specification of 6 hours. And that 6 hours and that 3 hours is a test that is sped up to promote the biodiesel being degraded in order to determine how long it would take under harsh conditions, and we're talking high temperatures, high moisture, that sort of thing. So antioxidant additives are used throughout the industry to help promote the shelf life of biodiesel. Now, how long it's going to be is actually a hard thing to determine, and it's really just down to how well your tanks are managed and how well your customers' tanks are managed. Things such as moisture, rust, or other contaminants that you can easily find in tanks and storage tanks, and even in some fuel tanks as well, will actually promote the degradation of fuels, whether it's biodiesel or petroleum distillate fuels. So that's why one thing that we do I strongly recommend to all customers is to know about the conditions of your tank. You know, check for water, check for rust flakes. Make sure that just the conditions of the tanks that you're storing your fuels in are in good conditions. If the conditions are well, the biodiesel and biodiesel blended fuels should last months, if not years. One case study is we had some biodiesel down in Arizona in a hot, dry climate that was stored in sealed tanks, and 3 years later we had opened the tanks and sampled and tested the fuels, and the stability was identical to what it was 3 years prior when we actually put the fuel down there. So as long as you're storing your biodiesel or your blended fuels in clean, dry environment, you should not have to worry about shelf life of your fuels at all.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Another question, you know, we talk about the different blends that you can have. You know, what blends are commonly going to be available? You have B2 up to B100. You know, what would be a platform, say at REG, to offer, you know, a different blend points to customers that might be interested in that?
Yeah, so a lot of it is dependent upon the state, city, or federal incentives that are out there. So we typically see biodiesel blends at 4 or 5 different blend levels. B2, obviously, to take advantage of the New York City mandate. Lots of folks will blend up to B5. Lots of folks want a B10. And then when discretionary blending economics are in place, where there's profitability for blending biodiesel into heating oil, transportation fuel, then we'll see folks take advantage of the 396 as well as the 6751 spec and blend up to a 20%. So we don't see a lot of like a B7 or B9 or B13. It typically is that B2, B5, B10, or up to B20, Keith.
Great. quick question, and it may be almost on a local to state by state basis, but are funds available for the tank infrastructure? With all of the different incentives that are out there, and I would assume that's
Yeah,
for
so
your bulk plants and those type of tanks.
Yep. So that tends to be very much a state-by-state situation. In New York, NYSERDA historically had funding available for some of those type of opportunities. But I would encourage you to reach out to your local state representatives and determine at the state level what's out there. There also tends to be from time to time some federal funds available for projects as well. But if people have specific questions, we can help them do the research along those lines, Keith.
Yeah. With all the different feedstocks out there, once you're done with a finished product, does feedstock matter at the end of the product or at the end of the process, or how does that work out?
Yeah, so you can make exceptional quality ASTM spec BQ 9000 biodiesel from virtually any feedstock, and REG and other companies have had a lot of success doing that, particularly over the last 5 years. The key attribute that's different depending on the feedstock is the cloud point of the finished fuel. So once again, managing cloud point is a combination of things. It's managing the cloud point of your biodiesel. It's managing the cloud point of the heating oil that you're mixing the biodiesel with. It's the proper utilization of additives. And then at the end of the day, it's what blend of fuel you're comfortable with, marketing in the environmental conditions that you're in, a B2, B5, B10 to B20. So in many of the harsher climates across the country, some of our customers will lower their blend levels for a couple of months. But I will tell you, in places like Minnesota and in Chicago, Illinois, the state of Illinois has a 11% biodiesel incentive. People use B11 in Illinois year-round. So even with the polar vortexes we've had in the Northeast the last couple of winters, when we have properly handled and managed our Bioheat, we have very, very few customer issues the last several years.
Great. Question probably for both Rocco and John. From a pure marketing standpoint, we've had, with heating oil costs certainly has been a market driver for a while, and now that the oil costs are down a bit, maybe you're getting back to some of the traditional drivers. But from a pure marketing standpoint, what does a dealer gain by going to market with a Bioheat offering?
Well, I think, as I said in one of my earlier slides, it gives us, the opportunity to say that we have the cleanest heating oil in the nation. So I think that's a pretty good, marketing point that that dealers can use.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think there are certainly economic considerations when there's good blending economics. There's also an opportunity, obviously, to position themselves as a green company. In New York State, there's cost savings for their customers. And just, as we continue to see, I think that the nation go greener and be more environmentally cautious, there's a real tremendous opportunity for retailers to differentiate themselves with the Bioheat brand and just, really appeal to some of their customers, interest in being green going forward.
There's a few questions left. We are running out of time. Some of them are fairly specific and probably more appropriate to a specific email, but I had some here focusing on just getting back the tax credit, and I guess that's how that happens will probably vary supplier to supplier, but I suppose the question there is what's REG's philosophy on the pass along of the tax credit, and what do you see in the industry in general? I mean, is it how does that work?
So I assume this is in reference to the federal blenders tax credit.
Right.
So obviously, when that legislation is in place, our customers have the opportunity to buy B99 or B100. When they buy B100, they get the IRS tax certificates and file with the IRS directly to claim the blender's tax credit. We also offer B99.9. It's typically $1 per gallon less than B100, and then don't require the customers to do the paperwork. So right now we're in this bit of an uncertain economic environment where we're simply not sure if the blender's tax credit is going to be in place or not. It's impacted negatively our margins as a producer, and has certainly negatively impacted our customers' ability to buy biodiesel at a significant discount to straight petroleum products. So what we'll do in some cases, depending on the customer, their size, if they're strategic, our relationship with them is share in that blender's tax credit if it would come back retroactively. That discussion takes place on a customer-by-customer basis.
All right. Now, the last question will be kind of a combination of their concern. There's a few folks that are expressing a bit of concern over cloud point and gelling with product in the Northeast, and I suppose just it's more generically. I think we've talked about some of the additization that can go into that, but how big a concern is that?
So if you have good practices in place in terms of putting warm biodiesel into warm number 2 ULSD, and you manage your tanks and you manage your blends appropriately, obviously at the end of the day, Bioheat is going into residences as well as commercial buildings that are protected environments. We have had very, very few issues when the suppliers, the handlers, and the end users of Bioheat have followed the right management guidelines. So it is certainly easily manageable. We have not had significant issues with it. We've sold both high cloud and low cloud products in the marketplace. We'll continue to do so, give our customers a choice. There does tend to be better blending economics buying higher cloud point products in the wintertime. But once again, we've been able to manage that issue with our customers both in the Northeast and throughout the country.
And real quick, as a follow-on to that, folks that have outdoor tanks, what's any special considerations for the bulk plant type operator that has?
Yeah, no. If you've got above ground outdoor tanks in the wintertime, you're going to need to carefully manage it. We will not store a neat B99, B100 in an unheated, uninsulated above ground tank in the wintertime. A lot of our customers and folks like ourselves at our terminals have made investments in insulation, in heating of tanks, and heat tracing to once again to allow us to properly deliver Bioheat to our customers.
Well, excellent. I think that about wraps us up for time. The final slide here should illustrate or should cover the points of contact for any follow-up questions that may have not been answered or something to think about later. Again, we're going to have a recording available of this presentation for those that arrived late, or if you have friends or acquaintances or colleagues that haven't seen it, you can find access to that at the Fuel Oil News website. Beyond that, again, thank you very much for attending. And be sure to download the handout that's available for both fallback as well as the contact information on the presentation. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Rocco. Thank you, John, for an excellent hour this afternoon.
Thank you, John, Keith, for the opportunity.
Thank you.